Okay, today I'll be reading from Rabbi Joseph Telushkins' Jewish Literacy. I found this book to be most helpful to me because it provided me with a synopsis of everything that I can learn and write a paper about or discuss or do further research into as far as Jewish lifestyle, the history of Jewish lifestyle, the history of the Israeli Jew, and the history of Jewish lifestyle in America and other parts of the world, all across space and time, from the beginning when Abraham first left Ur, all the way up through into the Inquisition, the Shoah, and even up to the modern days. And so I think it's a very, very good book. I would recommend this as required reading, as a matter of fact, for anyone that want to become versed in Jewish tradition and history. Now, there's many other books that I also love to read, but as far as a beginner is concerned that really, really wants to get some in-depth information and some real heartfelt material for dialogue, Joseph Telushkin's Jewish Literacy is one of the books that I would recommend. And I will be reading short excerpts from the book as food for discussion. And I'm going to take it from the very beginning, the very first chapter, part 1, which is Bible. Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, the prophets, Ketuvim, the writings. Tanakh rhymes with Bach. It is an acronym for 3 categories of the book that makes up the Hebrew Bible: Torah, Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. Observant Jews do not commonly refer to the Hebrew Bible as the Old Testament. That is a Christian usage. The first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible comprise the Torah, and are regarded as Judaism's central document. Along with the stories about the patriarch and Moses, the Exodus from Egypt, they contain 613 commandments, the backbone of all later Jewish law. In Hebrew, the 5 books are also called Shamash, from the Hebrew word shamas, which means 5. According to Jewish tradition, the books were dictated to Moses by God somewhere around 1220 BCE, shortly after the Exodus from Egypt. In Hebrew, each book of the Torah is named after its first or second word, while the English names summarize the contents of the book. Thus, the first tells the story of creation of the world. In this one instance, the Hebrew name is very similar, since the Torah opening words is Bereshit, meaning in the beginning, in Hebrew. The Torah's second book is called Shemot, or names, because it reads the verses Allah Shemat B'nai Yisrael, and these are the names of the children of Israel. In English, the book is called Exodus, because it tells the story of the liberation of the Jewish slaves from Egypt. Leon Uris wisely chose to call his novel Exodus rather than Names. The Torah's third book, Leviticus, Vaikira in Hebrew, delineates the laws concerning animal sacrifices and other temple rituals, which were supervised by the Israeli tribe of Levites. The fourth book, Numbers, was supervised by the Israelites. The fourth book, Numbers, Midbar, in Hebrew, is named for the census of Israelites that is carried out. Early in the book, it also tells the story of Korah's rebellion against Moses' leadership. The final book of the Torah is Deuteronomy, Devarim in Hebrew. Virtually the entire book consists of Moses' farewell address to the Israelites as they prepare to cross over to the Promised Land. He knows that he will not be permitted to enter it, but before he dies, he imparts his last thoughts to the nation he had founded. The second category of biblical books is the Nevi'im, 21 books that trace Jewish history and the history of monotheism from the time of Moses' death and Israel's entrance into Canaan about 1200 BCE to the period after the Babylonians destroyed the first temple and the ensuing exile of the Jews from Jerusalem to Babylon in 586 BC. The early books of the Nevi'im, Judges, Joshua Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, are written in a narrative style and remain among the most dramatic and vivid histories that any civilization has produced. These books are sometimes referred to as the early prophets. The later books, written in a poetic form, are what we will commonly think when we refer to the prophetic books of the Bible. They primarily consist of condemnations of Israelite betrayal of monotheistic ideas, and the call for ethical behavior. Here you find non-stop ruminations about evil, suffering, and sin. In English, the primary meaning of prophet is one who predicts the future. However, the corresponding Hebrew word, Navi, means spokesman for God. The final books of the Tanakh are known as Ketuvim and have little in common. Some are historical. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah, for example, tells the story of the Jews' return from Israel following the Babylonian exile, while 1st and 2nd Chronicles provide an overview of Jewish history. Ketuvim also contains Psalms, 150 poems, some transporting in their beauty about the man's relationship to God. Another book, Job, grapples with the most fundamental challenges to religion. Why does a God who is good allow so much evil in the world? See the trial of Job in Theodicy. In Ketuvim are also found the 5 scrolls, which include perhaps the best known biblical book aside from the Torah, Esther. The Hebrew Bible has been the most influential book in human history. Both Judaism and Christianity consider it to be one of their major religious texts. Several of its central ideas that there's one God over all mankind, one universe standard of morality, that people are obligated to care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, that people should refrain from work one day a week and dedicate themselves to making that day holy, and that the Jews have been chosen by God to spread his message to the world, have transformed both men and women, transformed both how men and women lived and how they understood their existence. Even the last of the ideas enumerated, Jewish chosenness, has powerfully affected non-Jews. Indeed, the idea was so compelling that Christianity appropriated it, contending that the special covenant between God and the people he had passed from the Jews, Old Israel, to the Church, New Israel. Islam, in turn, similarly insisted that Muhammad and his followers had become God's new messengers, see chosen people. The Bible's influence is the thought that patterns of non-religion as well as religious people, the idea that human beings are responsible for each other, crystallized by Cain's infamous question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Genesis 4:9, has become part of the backbone of Western civilization. Our values in every area of life, even if we've never seen the inside of a synagogue or church, are suffused with biblical concepts and images. We deride excessive materialism for worshiping the golden calf, Exodus 32:4, and forgetting that man does not live by bread alone, Deuteronomy 8:3. The appeal to a man's conscience can be like a voice crying in the wilderness, Isaiah 43. And pride goes before the fall, Proverbs 16:18. And while it warns us, while the cynical, jaded Ecclesiastes teaches that there is nothing new under the sun, 1:9. In daily speech, when we refer to the plague, we of course harking back to the famous series of the 10 plagues that struck Egypt. The Bible is so basic to Jewish life that when I draw up a list of terms that make up the basic Jewish literacy, almost 20% come from the Bible. And yet, as important as the Bible is, few people today read it. Even religious Jews generally restrict their reading of Tanakh to the Torah, the Psalms, and the 5 scrolls. Yet, without a knowledge of the basic textbook of Judaism, how can any person claim to be Jewishly literate? Thus ends chapter 1. What it seems to me is that Jewish literacy is just like Jewish lifestyle can be chosen in bits and pieces, or have been chosen in bits and pieces throughout time. However, it is almost apparent that there is a distinctive difference between the average Jewish individual, or the average individual who wants to learn, and on the other hand, those who are devout or diligently dedicated to learning new ideas or understanding ideas that has already been brought to fore. For example, there are some that are interested in knowing the law, and then there are some that are interested in becoming lawyers. There are some that are interested in becoming judges. And because of these things, a level of advanced education and reading and investigation becomes warranted. In my case, I like to see myself as a growing, devout Jew who sees life on a continuum. That my life did not just begin with my birth from my mother and from my father, but as a continuum, as a growing and evolutionary process that goes all the way back to Canaan, when the children went into Egypt. A lot of times I would like to think that my Jewish literacy springs forth from that root and seed, and then it is nurtured and nourished by readings of text, the study of scripture, the dialogue with other Jews, and also in teaching others. I get opportunity to refresh my own thinking and debate within myself. Because of this method of learning and in this method of teaching, there's a richness to Jewish tradition. And part of that richness is involved in the dialogue from the Jews one with another. That dialogue continued over the generations and have been published in a book called the Mishnah Torah, or the Talmud. And the Talmud is a conversation from one generation to the next, eventually ending up as a section where there is laws, the halakha, there is writings, the Haggadah, and then there's writings that came afterwards called the Midrash, And all of these are designed to give us a well-rounded view of what it's like to be a devout Jew. Also, what it would be like to conduct oneself ethically in both the Jewish and the non-Jewish society. Excuse me. Therefore, Jewish literature becomes a very, very important aspect of my life, and I would hope that it would become a very, very important aspect of your life if you are Jewish, but also that it would become a very, very interesting and thought-provoking aspect of your life, even if you're not Jewish. For as I was reading in literacy, it was Abraham who would be claimed to be the father of all of the three major religions, and it will behoove us all to understand one another better as a result of that. We are indeed our brother's keeper, and it doesn't matter from which tribe we spring, nor does it matter from which bridge we've crossed. But what matters is that when our path crosses one another, that we can cross the path in joy and peace and a shared commonness, that we are all members of the human family and we all strive together for peace. Shalom.